Hello, and welcome to the Power of Passive Investing meetup. We have an amazing guest today, as always, and my co-host Matt is having challenges with his Zoom, so hopefully he'll be able to join us in a minute or so. But in the meantime, let me share my slides and just go over our usual rules as always. So I'm going to share my screen. Just give me a second, guys. Okay. So again, welcome to the Power of Passive Investing meetup. Matt is going to be here in a minute. We're thrilled to have you all with us. I know a lot of you are watching the recording, and for those that are here, you may want to rewatch the recording because of the number of nuggets of wisdom that our guest today, Ken, will be sharing with you. The usual disclaimers: this is for educational purposes only. We're not selling anything, and always consult with your hired professionals, CPAs, attorneys, and whatnot before making any sort of decisions. We offer you to send your questions in the chat. If you want to ask them live, we can definitely unmute you and have you ask your questions live. And as I said, our guest today is Ken Naim. Ken has been investing for the last 25 years. He purchased his first property after graduating from college as a pharmacist. 2 years later, Ken decided that his strong problem-solving and math skills would be better applied in information technology as a DB administrator and developer. Those same skills has helped him build a small residential portfolio with a mix of single family as well as small multifamily in 3 different states, while building database consulting practice. About 5 years ago, Ken started selling off his residential portfolio and made the move to purchasing value-add commercial real estate, where he could directly affect the appreciation of the property. Since then, he has acquired and sold a 40,000 square foot industrial building, 37,000 square foot office building, a medical condo with a dental practice, and has started 2 land syndications. Ken's goals are to educate residential investors the benefits of commercial real estate investing while continuing to grow his commercial and land portfolios and spending more time with his lovely wife and 2 young kids. And the topic for tonight is making the leap from residential to commercial, because that's where Ken has the expertise. So make sure you take notes. And again, the recording will be available as always in a day or so. So you'll be able to rewatch it if you'd like. And if there are any questions, Matt and I are also available. Feel free to reach out to either one of us. We're happy to have a one-on-one with you if you have any projects you want to discuss or any offerings, or would like to know whether we have any current real estate offerings for you. On that note, and without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Ken and give him the floor.
Thank you, Alina. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. As Alina said, Matt's joining. As Alina said, I started off my career as a pharmacist, and I realized that I hated it. And even though I went to school for over 5 years to get there, it was a very easy decision for me because I wasn't happy there. It wasn't getting me to where I wanted to be. And even though it was a very high-paying job out of college, it really capped out right away. And I knew I wanted to be successful, and I knew I wanted to, I knew it wasn't going to get me where I wanted to go. So even though people were asking me, you know, how can you give up all that education? And I go very easily. It's just wasn't the right thing for me. And when you made a mistake, the faster you turn around, the better off you are, okay? Just because you made a mistake doesn't mean that you have to live with it for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, okay? Just, for me, it was just simple, and I left it. Hey, Matt, you want to say hello to everyone?
Yeah, hi Ken. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late here. I did catch the intro. Alina, great job setting him up. Ken, I know that might be is that a digital background? Was it's not, I'm gonna ask more questions.
Yes, yes, it is a digital background. It just reminds me of what I'm working for every day and investing
Excellent.
for.
Where are
So,
you calling in from today?
well, I am in Florida, so
Excellent.
that is my home, but I'm not, I don't live on the beach yet, you
All
know,
right.
maybe in a couple more years.
But very close to the beach.
Yeah, about 8 miles, so 15 minutes away.
Good enough. Sorry to interrupt. Just wanted
Oh,
to say.
no worries, no worries. Where was I? So I left pharmacy and I went into IT, and IT was really, really good for me for a long time. I really enjoyed it. It let me use my natural talents and abilities that I worked on, problem solving, strong math skills, just being able to look into problems and see what other people didn't see. You know, so a lot of times I'd be the fourth or fifth person to be called in to solve a problem. And sometimes it was big companies, sometimes it was small companies, sometimes they had staff there to figure them out, and they couldn't see even what the problem was. Forget about the solution. And 90% of the time, if you can figure out what the problem is, the solution is evident. Okay, so focus on figuring out what the problems are. Usually, once you know what the problem is, you know, getting the solution is relatively straightforward. And I and I would bring it and I would solve these things, and people would think I would walk on water. And a lot of times I just seen the problems before and I just knew where the stones were. So if you know where the stones are, you know, walking on water is kind of easy, you know, because usually they're right below the surface and you just need to know where to step. And so I did that. And all the while I was building up a small residential portfolio. I bought a 4 family, a 3 family, single family in my first year of rentals that weren't a family. And it was okay. They were mostly Section 8 rentals in New York, which is not the best state for Section 8 rentals, as you probably know. And it was very difficult and it took up a lot of time, but I did well. I bought one property back then. This was like 25 years ago, so prices were a lot cheaper back then. It was like 260, did $30,000 worth of rehab to it and sold it a couple years later, I think 495 if I'm not mistaken. But that was the residential market at the time. You had no control over it. You know, if prices went up, they went up. If they went down, they went down. And later on, when I talk about commercial, you'll see that the commercial market is different. You have a lot more input into that area. And the only difference between commercial and residential could be something as simple as 1 unit, 5 units, 5 apartments, 5 garden-style townhouses, 5 anything on the residential side becomes commercial. So a 5 unit is treated as very differently than a 4 unit multifamily, a quadplex or whatever. Of course, commercial also extends into office and retail and industrial and flex and even land can be considered commercial, but that's a different story. But getting back to the residential, I acquired some, but I got tired of dealing with Section 8 and the quality of the tenants in New York. It was pretty bad. And New York's a very tough city to rent out because New York will find the landlord for stuff that the tenants do, and you can't pass along those fines. So if they don't recycle, you get fined. You have to go to court. If they don't take care of the driveway when it snows, it's your fine, your violation. Different things like that. So eventually, I think it was 2005, I started to sell off all my properties in New York, and I started buying properties in Oklahoma and parts of Florida, South Florida, Central Florida, and I bought single family homes in good school districts. I bought brand new homes mostly because I didn't want to deal with a ton of repairs and maintenance, and I wanted more of a easier lifestyle. And then I quickly 2008, 2009 came around, and I was fine because I had good equity in the properties, and the properties went down in value. Not so much in Oklahoma, but in Florida, they went down a lot. But it was fine. The rent was covering. I was making good money consulting, and I was using that extra funds to pay down the mortgages because I had the idea that, you know, if I have 10 properties all paid off, you know, they'll generate at least $1,000 a month in passive cash flow. And, you know, and that's 10 grand a month. And, you know, what more do I need, you know? So I did that. I got to the point where I was completely debt free, no mortgages, nothing. But then I started looking at my properties, and the returns were abysmal. You know, with a paid off property, you know, yeah, you might be making $1,000 a month, but if it's worth 250,000, you're making 4% on your money. You know, why go through all the headaches and risks of real estate for 4%? You know, buy a treasury bill or whatever. Today, you can even buy a CD for more than that. So, but I was so busy building my consulting practice, I let it sit for years. Like that. And a lot of times I'd have vacancy, and I lost 7 roofs in 3 years in Oklahoma due to hailstorms. So my insurance went up from $600 a year to $3,000 a year. So it didn't matter what was happening to the rent. You know, we were making way less money at that point. I think my returns went down to like 2.5% before I actually decided, okay, I'm done with residential properties. You know, I also had one hoarder that it cost me like $20,000 to rehab the unit after they moved out. So I had a lot of different things go wrong in the residential space. And when you only have 10 units, you know, one small thing goes wrong and it affects your entire portfolio. Not only do you lose money going forward, even the money that you made for the last 2-3 years on a property can get wiped out. So you think you made money, but you can never be sure until you actually sell it. So, and I just didn't like that, but I didn't have anything better to do with it. You know, I had a lot of money already in my retirement accounts in the stock market. I didn't want to put more in the stock market. So what do? So I looked and I looked for different opportunities, and a lot of things didn't work out. But then I thought about commercial real estate. So I started selling off my entire portfolio of residential. I waited till the leases were up, and I sold them off one by one, did whatever rehabs we needed to do to get them sold, tried to get the best prices I could. And I built up a small nest egg that I was going to invest into commercial, because I didn't know much about commercial. So I started learning as much as I can. I got a little bit of advice that was, a lot of it was wrong. And I thought, oh, you need a lot of money to do commercial real estate. You know, I thought, okay, you need like $1 million, you know, to go in and buy something. Turns out that's completely wrong for several reasons. The first one is there are a lot of commercial properties around the country that you can buy for way less than $1 million. You know, for whatever a triplex or a quadplex will cost you in the Midwest, you can buy a small strip center for the same thing, $500,000, $600,000, and you can finance that. So you might only need $100,000, $120,000, $150,000 down for a $600,000 triplex. It's not nothing. You need some capital for it. Okay, but it's not $1 million at the same time. So by selling off my properties that were paid off, I had more than I needed, and I could have got into commercial way earlier. The other thing is, if you can find a good deal, you can find the capital for it. You can start with friends and family. You can put it out there on social media. There are many, many people with capital out there that are looking to invest, and they're looking for good deals. And that's the other thing in commercial. Everybody thinks of commercial, I want a triple net lease, and triple nets are nice, but they don't pay very much. You know, you might make 5, 6, 7%, a little bit higher than what a bond will pay, because a triple net is similar to a bond. But in the commercial space, you can make outsized returns. My first commercial deal that I bought was a $40,000, 40,000 square foot dilapidated warehouse. It used to be a Ford wire manufacturing facility, and then it became an airplane, in a light airplane manufacturing company. Then it became a boat manufacturing company where they had 3 different boat companies in there, and I think 1 surfboard company at the same time, if I'm not mistaken. And it just was so run down. There was trash everywhere inside. And if you ever seen a house that has a hoarder in it, imagine something that's 20 times bigger with hoarders in there, okay? And a 10-acre piece of land that's full of trash. So I bought that, and I knew it was a good deal from the moment I heard about it. They were asking I think 1.3 million for it, and it had been appraised 6 months earlier for like 2 million, 2.1 million. So I knew even as is, it was undervalued. I was able to negotiate them down to 1.25 million. And then there were some issues right before closing. I got them down another 25,000 before closing. Unlike residential, commercial properties, nothing is set in stone until you close on the property. Even the day before, you can renegotiate something if something doesn't work out, or even at the closing table, it's not unheard of. So you have opportunities to fix stuff as it goes along. And I started working on the place, and it was, like I said, in bad shape. So I had to hire a ton of vendors to empty it out, to clean it up, fix the outside. They even had this cooling pit where they used to cool the wires that when they once they were forged, and we had to fill that in. And the outside of the warehouse was in awful shape, and we had to patch all the holes in the warehouse and paint the outside. The parking lot looked like the surface of the moon. It had craters in the concrete surface, and we got quotes for like 200,000, 300,000 to redo the parking lot. Finally found some guy that would do it for me for $100,000, 105. The roof was leaking, and it's a 40,000 square foot roof. So a roof like that, it's not a small fix. Everything is measured in tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on a place like that. So we needed to patch the roof, and I think we took 40 cubic yard dumpsters, and I think we used 15 of them to clear out all the trash from the inside and the outside. And it was just a big mess. But after we were all done with it, we spent about $400,000 in renovation on it, and we sold it 13 months later for 2.7 million. And I could have done better. After I was in contract, I got offers as high as 3.1 million. And if I had leased it out, if I had the patience to wait until it was leased out, we probably could have gone in 3.5 to 4 million, somewhere in that range. And that's the value that you create. You know, it's kind of like flipping a home, where you do some major rehab to it and you get more value out of it. But on the commercial side, it's not just the physical stuff that you can do to improve the price. It's also the fiscal item. If I lease it out to Ken Naim manufacturing, I'll get one price for the building. But if I lease it out to Amazon or something, I'll get a much higher price because they have a better credit rate. So, and there's everything in between. You could have national tenants, regional tenants, you know, chain tenants, you know, those will get you better prices than just a mom and pop that's starting out their first business. And that's true whether it's industrial or retail. Like if you lease out to a coffee shop, you'll get one price. You lease out to Starbucks, you're going to get a much higher price. So these are all different elements that you can use to affect the price. Now, in a residential home, you can't do this. You know, you take a $250,000 a square foot house, $250,000 home, 2,000 square feet, and you put in gold faucets and gold toilets, and you make it absolutely gorgeous, and nobody's going to pay for it more than what the neighbor next door, which is just a standard home, will pay. But you take two office buildings, for example, built at the same year by the same builder, same layout, same everything, and one is completely leased up with great quality tenants, it'll be worth almost double than the building next door that's sitting vacant. So by bringing in quality improvements, and it's a balance of how much you can actually physically improve on it, but with the leases, it's unlimited potential. The higher the price, the longer the term, the better the quality tenant, the more people will pay for that property. And it's literally for every $1,000 that you add in income a month to a property, and that's whether it's higher rents or lower expenses or any combination thereof, you can literally add $150,000 or more to a commercial property in value. So if you figure out how to reduce the electric bill by $1,000 a month, you just made $150,000. You know, you got a tenant to increase the rent by $1,000, that's another $150,000. Now, if you have 5 tenants and you do it for 5 tenants plus the electric bill, you know, that's $900,000 in increase. Now, to do that in the residential space, very, very difficult, because you have to wait for the market to improve. And even when the market's been booming like it had up until recently, you know, it goes up 10%. But you can literally increase a commercial property's value by 50%, 70%. And a lot of people will look at me when I say stuff like that, and they'll say that's impossible. I say, you can just look at my deals. You know, the office building, we made 70% on it in 13 months. The office building, I'll probably sell that beginning of 2024, and we'll probably make 100% on that in less than 3 years on our down payment and everything. Our land deals, those will gross close to 70 to 80% in 12 to 15 months each. So even the medical condo, which was tiny, I paid $335 for it. It's worth $750 today. I've owned it for 4 months. So and it's not easy to do, but it's not something that requires a super high level of intelligence. You don't need to know calculus for it. You don't need to be a rocket scientist. You know, it's just putting in the work and getting it done, finding the deals, finding the capital, going through the loan process if you're going to take a loan, and getting the rehab done, getting the tenants in there and doing the work. But it's not very hard, and it's not super time consuming either if you do the right deals.
So Ken, if we can, I don't know if you're done with your presentation or you want to talk some more, but I have questions.
Definitely, I'm open for questions.
Yeah, excellent. And thank you for sharing your journey and how you progressed from one career to another, from W2 to entrepreneurial journey. I mean, sounds very familiar to me, but yeah, I know it's not easy, and I'm sure there were quite a few challenges on the way. You mentioned earlier that, you know, look at the problem and then find the solution, and people think you walk on water. Well, now that you moved from New York to Florida, you probably do walk on water to a degree. But anyway, let's use an example of the medical condo that you mentioned. So what kind of problem did it have, and how did you solve it with that condo? Can you share?
Medical condo was actually one of the easiest ones that I came across. It was an estate sale, and the trustee of the estate, he had 3 dental offices that his father owned, and he wanted to sell it. But he was a musician, So he
Oh.
didn't know anything about commercial real estate. So we had to educate him about commercial real estate, and he had the property appraised about 4 or 5 months before he put it on the market. And he was stuck on the appraisal price for all 3 of them. The problem was that in those 4 months, interest rates went up a good 2.5 points and last year. And it went up so much in those 2.5 in those 4 months that the price that they were appraised in August wouldn't be the price that anybody would pay for them in December. It just didn't work. And I was trying to figure, and one of them was mispriced, the cheapest one out of the bunch. It was probably worth about 550, 600 is what we got it appraised for at the time. But they appraised it for 335. But the other 2 were so overinflated that that I was trying to figure out, oh, maybe if I buy all 3, then I sell the cheapest one for, let's say, 550 or 600. Maybe I could use that for the down payment. I tried to come up with some creative solutions, but at the end of the day, the numbers didn't work for me. Okay, because I'm very aggressive in my deals, but I do them in a very conservative way. So it has to be a great deal for me to even look at it. Because if it's not a great deal, then the risk benefit just doesn't really work. I want to make sure that I never lose money on a deal. Okay, and the only way I can guarantee that is if I buy it at a good price. You know, if I buy it at market price and something doesn't work out, I miss something, you know, population demographics change, something happens beyond my control, then I'll lose money. But if I buy it 20%, 30% below market, then even if things go against me, I'll probably break even. All my land deals, my goal is, worst case scenario is break even. Okay, I never want to lose my money, and I definitely never want to lose other people's money. I'm more conservative with theirs than I am with my own. So with this medical condo, I try to figure it out, and at the end of the day, I told him that I couldn't do it. But if he wanted to sell the 1 unit, okay, he goes, no, I want to sell them all 3. So I said, thank you very much, and I walked away. But I walked away in a very pleasant manner. Okay, I find people, especially real estate people, a lot of them can be very aggressive and brutal and just not being nice. And I find that if you are nice, you will get more deals. Okay, so the trustee eventually spoke with the trust attorney, and it took a couple of months until, you know, because he didn't move very quickly. Even from our offers, it took a few months of the whole thing going on. And finally, he came back, and the attorney convinced him. He says, oh, if he's willing to pay full appraisal on that one, sell him just that one. Get your beneficiaries some money on there. So he came back and said, yeah, if you pay the 335 for the medical condo, then we have a deal. So we actually bought it. And I don't know if the father was doing this or just the son, but they weren't billing back insurance and association charges back to the dental office. And that was a difference of a few $1,000s a month in expenses that I was picking up, essentially. And the lease was written in 1996. So it was a very old lease written by a dentist. So it wasn't a great quality lease, but it was written as if it was a triple net lease. Okay, but it wasn't black and white triple net lease. So I sent a bill when I took over to the dental office, and I listed all the claim charges and everything. And they pushed back and they said, oh, we've never paid this before. And they only paid the property taxes, and they only paid it at the end of the year after you submitted proof of payment. And I said, no, you know, every month I want it, you know, 1/12 of the property taxes and the insurance and the association fees. except for even on triple net leases, roof and structure are typically not covered. And in this lease, it specifically said that roof and structure are not covered. And there was a loan that the association was paying for the roof to replace the roof that they did several years before. So I took that out of the CAIM charges and I sent them a bill essentially for property taxes, insurance, and the association fees minus the proportional share of the roof charges. And they came back and said, we've never paid this before. I go, I don't know what you paid before or not, but based on my reading of the lease, it says that you're responsible for all these items. And they said, okay, we'll look into it. And, you know, a few weeks go by and they said, I'd follow up. And I keep following up with them. And after about 2 months, all of a sudden, I get a check or direct deposit actually for almost double the month's rent. And I'm trying to play with the numbers to figure out exactly what they paid because they didn't send any type of statement with it. And I go through it and I figure out not only did they pay the CAIM charges going forward, they paid it back all the way to January of this year. Okay. And since then, June 1st, we got a direct deposit for the exact amount, including all the monthly CAIM charges going forward. So now, is it a big deal? Maybe $1,000, $1,500 a month, something like that. It doesn't sound like, oh my God, it's huge difference. But when I go to sell it, $1,500 a month is $18,000 a year. And for an investor that's looking to get an 8% return, $18,000 a year divided by 8%, that's 180, basically about $250,000 more in sale price. So that one negotiation that took 2 months, but over the 2 months, maybe it took 6 hours worth of work, and I made $250,000 on it. So I don't know about you, but I don't know anybody that really makes $40,000 an hour for work. So, and it's worth it. And it wasn't a tremendous amount of effort, just a bunch of emails and, you know, sending the lease. I'm sure they had their lawyers review it and they looked at it and they go, yeah, it's not exactly black and white and we could try to fight it, but they only had 2.5 years left on their lease and they probably want to stay because they're doing very well over there. So they figured out that it's worth it for them and they don't really want to fight in. When we go to renew, it's going to be a triple net lease anyway. So the $18,000 probably means nothing for this dental office that I don't know how much they're making a year, but maybe it's 200, 400, $1 million a year. They look at it very differently than we do as investors because they're running their business out of it. And they're not going to argue over $20,000 when they're making $1 million a year on it, and they don't want to lose it.
100%. Yeah, wow, that was an awesome explanation. Thank you, Ken. We actually have one question from the audience. Folks, feel free to post more questions in the Q&A. So James asked, do you do commercial deals remotely? If so, how do you source property management, if at all, assuming you long-term hold?
Well, I'm a value add. I'll address that in a few parts. Number one, I'm a value add investor. So I add value to properties, okay, either fix physical defects or fix financial issues with the building. If there's occupancy, I try to get it as close to full as I can be. And I try to address any type of expenses that we can trim or cut or do better with. And so as a value add investor, once I've added the value to the building, I don't want to hold it because then the returns drop, you know, like in the beginning, like first year, 2, 3, I can make 30% a year. I can make 100% on a property, 70%. But once it's all stabilized, it becomes a traditional deal that'll make you 8, 9, 10, maybe 12% if you're lucky. So why would I hold a property for 12% cash on equity when I could sell it and either 1031 or not into another property and again, make 30, 40, 50, 60%. Now, one day, I'm sure I'll get to the point where I'll be tired of value add and I will have at least some stabilized assets, or maybe even, maybe when I'm 70 or 80, I'll have 100% stabilized assets. But for right now, buy and hold is not even part of my vocabulary. As far as management, I live in South Florida. Most of the properties that I've been acquiring lately are in Central Florida, or at least the very northern part of South Florida. And they're at least an hour, hour and a half, 3 hours away. So it's not something that I just drive by and do. So management, I still manage my own properties because they're not really huge properties, and it's hard to find good property managers. And that's true on the commercial side, it's true on the residential side. And nobody's going to take care of them as well as you will. So I try to automate as much as possible, and I hire local vendors to do almost everything. So I'll hire a maintenance man for the office building, okay? And he's responsible for everything. He's responsible for meeting with the vendors. He's responsible for, setting up lock boxes if we have a vacant suite or something like that. He does a lot of the actual repairs in the building, but if it needs something specialized like a plumber, we have a Rolodex of plumbers, electricians, different vendors. If it's something that we've never dealt with before, I'll either look for it, or have an assistant look for it. Let's say our front door shattered one day, and we need a glass company to come out and a door company to come out to repair it. So we have to look for that on short notice. So we looked for that. We had somebody come out. He meets with them. He shows them what they have to do, and he bills by the hour. And it's fine. Rather than paying a flat fee to a property manager that's going to charge you by the hour for anything extra anyway, we just save that cost, and that goes directly to our pocket. We do our own bookkeeping, but most of that's done by the portal software. We have software that bills the tenants, it emails them, it allows them to submit maintenance requests. So there's not a lot of work for a property manager. And once you get to a certain size, and I think I'm relatively close to that now, I'm going to hire my own property manager. And this way, instead of dealing with 200 properties and having no time for any of them, they might deal with my 5 or 10 commercial properties. And this way I'll pay what I would pay for one property in property management fees could be her salary for the whole year. So, and you'll get more attention to it. Did I cover everything? Question?
I think so. I think the main idea was, if the properties you buy are remote, and, especially if it's 3 hours away, you're not going to drive there very frequently, then how do you manage it? So essentially you find the local professionals, not the property managers, but professionals that tradesmen, electricians, people that can fix other things, contractors, and hire them directly without using property manager to do the work.
Yeah.
And in terms of, again, going back to the theme of solving problems for other people, can you share a little bit what problems are you solving in Central Florida, and what are you buying to solve those problems?
Problems sometimes are, there's always problems. Like, apparently when they built this office building, they didn't put P-traps in the plumbing for the sewer lines in each floor's bathroom. So there's a bad smell that used to come up every now and again. And they used to deal with it just with bleach and stuff. So I hired a company to come out, and they scoped out the drains with a camera. It cost like $700 to scope out the drains. And they said, basically, there's no P-traps. So now we're getting quotes on installing P-traps in the first, second, and third floor bathrooms. And, and it probably will cost a few $1,000s, I'm guessing, on it. And it should take care of it. All of a sudden, front door breaks, and the glass shatters. So you have to hire guys to come out with plywood, and then you have to hire, a glazer to come out and deal with it. It's just annoying things, but it doesn't take a tremendous amount of effort or a tremendous amount of time. But these can be emergencies that have to be dealt with right away. Your front door is busted. You can't say, I'll deal with it next week. One day the HVAC went out in the middle of the summer. And in Florida, there's no such thing as running an office building without HVAC working. So you have to call the HVAC company. And then the HVAC company says it's not an HVAC issue. It's actually an issue with the fire alarm that shut down the HVAC system. So you have to get onto the fire monitoring system. So you just have to be able to make yourself available and deal with the issues as they come up. Some issues can wait, some issues not so much. I'm just looking at my board here of what issues, and it could be something as simple as the front doormat, was ripped up by the hurricane that passed through. Luckily, that was the extent of our damages. So we had to get a front doormat, but at that size, they weren't available because of all these supply chain issues. So it's been on my board for weeks now. I'm just waiting for it to become available so I can order it. But then you have a tenant complain, why is there no front doormat? I go, because the old one was a tripping hazard. So it's just a lot of small things, and to pay somebody $40,000 a year to deal with these small things, for one property, just doesn't make a ton of sense.
True. Ken, can you talk about what attracts you in land deals?
Land deals are very interesting. Builders or developers that like to actually construct buildings of any site, whether it's multifamily or commercial, they hate the land development process. The land development process requires you to hire engineers that are way overworked and they are very slow. And then they submit all these site plans and everything to the county, which is another arguably overworked and very slow entity. And it could be the county or municipality or city, depending where you live. But they're all ridiculously slow, and they're bureaucrats, and they're going to nitpick the plan to death. And it could take 6 months, 9 months, a year, 10 years in certain parts of the country to get that plan approved. And that's if you're doing things that they want done. If you actually have to fight them, it could take even longer and it could be much more difficult, much more expensive. And builders are give us the plans and we're going to build it to spec. They don't like variables. They don't like, well, is it going to get approved for 100 units or 200 units? They don't like that risk. They like very definitive things. So as an investor and land developer, you have an opportunity to take the risk away from these developers, these that will actually build, and you have an opportunity to profit in between. Because they might be doing a $20 million construction project, and they're willing to spend, let's say, $5 million for the land for it. Because they know that they're going to sell their project, they're going to spend 20 plus the 5 million for the land. They know they're going to sell it for 40. But they're going to get that project once it's approved and it's ready and they have plans. So they're going to invest the 25 million, make 40 million, and they're thrilled on the project. Now, if you can go out and buy the land for 1 or 2 million, spend $500,000 in a year getting it developed, because that's about what it takes in Florida, year and a half to get this done. So you can sell it to them for 5 and they're thrilled, okay? Because that margin, that extra 1 million, 2 million, 3 million that you're going to make in profit is almost negligible for them. And if they have to raise the money to do it and their project takes another year and a half, to make 25 million over 4 years, or to make 25, to make 28 million over 4 years, or to make 25 million over 2.5 years, which one would you prefer? And they'll much rather make the 25 million over 2.5 years. So the math works for them. It simplifies their lives, and it increases their percent returns dramatically. And this way, and on the land side, the beautiful thing of being a real estate investor and a commercial real estate investor is that there are no toilets that break. There's no HVAC that goes down. It's just land. So you meet with the architects, and there are different problems that come up as well that you have to deal with. But you can all do that from your home office. I go see the sites when I'm in due diligence, and maybe when I'm done with the project, just to say goodbye. You never have to go out there. There's nothing to see. There's nobody to meet with, because you're not actually building anything. You're selling it to the actual builder. So, it's all desktop work. And most of the work is actually done by professionals, and you're just guiding the process. So you're spending 2 hours, 3 hours a week, some weeks, other weeks you might do nothing on it. And the beautiful thing is nothing is that urgent that it can't wait till tomorrow or next week. You don't want to wait too long, because that is going to increase the length of your project. But, if you're out with your family at the beach today, you just get to it tonight or tomorrow. There are no phone calls that are, oh, this has to be taken care of immediately. One thing I realized I forgot to mention about the best thing about commercial real estate versus residential is, number one, tenants improve your properties rather than destroying them. I don't know about how many people have rented to tenants. I've never had a property that came back to me in better condition than when I gave it to them in a residential property. But in commercial property, that's almost always the case, because those companies, they're open for business, they're business minded, they're trying to hire employees, they're trying to hire vendors, they're trying to get customers in there if it's a customer facing business, and they want the place to look nice. So you might give them a small allowance to improve it, but usually they're going to go much further. The CEO is going to want his office to be much nicer. The warehouse, they're going to put in, new flooring, new machinery. They're going to upgrade the electrical, the plumbing, for whatever their particular business is. And usually they will make your property more valuable than when you gave it to them. And the second part of that is, when are businesses open for business? Monday through Friday, business hours, maybe Saturday mornings. So if something does go wrong, when do they call you? They call you in business hours, typically 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday through Friday, and maybe Saturday mornings. But when do residential tenants call you? If they're actually working, they're probably going to call you at 9 p.m. weekends, maybe 3 a.m. when the toilet breaks, so you never get phone calls outside of business hours. And usually they will end up fixing the problem themselves. If the toilet breaks, they rather just call the plumber and spend $150 than even bother you with it. So, and it really depends on how your lease is written. And sometimes, yes, you'll get a more troublesome commercial tenant, especially if you acquire them with the building. But usually when you're leasing it out, you get a good feel of the tenant on the commercial space and how demanding they're going to be based on their requirements for the lease and for the build out. So you can really filter out the really bad tenants, or you could just say, you know what, you're responsible for everything, and then they don't really have a reason to call you.
Makes sense. Ken, there's one more question from the audience. It's probably going to be the last one, since we're getting close to the top of the hour. I do want to make sure that the audience has a way to reach out to you if they would like to have a follow-up. So what would be the best way to connect with you?
You can connect with me on Facebook or LinkedIn. It's Ken Naim, N-A-I-M, or you can just email me at ken@beaconoffices.com. Beacon is B-E-A-C-O-N, and offices is plural.
And I'm going to type it in the chat, beaconoffices.com.
.com.
Okay, type it in the chat. Or LinkedIn or Facebook, you said, right?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Ken. Let me read the question from James. What is the typical time and month to fill the vacancy for commercial properties in the areas you invest?
With the office building, last year we had some difficulty leasing it out, and it was just that the increasing rates of every month just was freaking out businesses. And just like it freaks out investors, it also freaks out people that are looking to expand their business or get additional square footage. So we got a lot of showings, but we got a few leases out there, but people were just turned off. So it can take 6 months to lease out a vacant property. In this case, it took us about 13 months to get there. But when I build my pro formas for commercial, pro forma is just what you expect from the property. I gave myself 36 months to lease it out, okay? And I was hoping to do it in 6 months, okay? But it took me 13 months. But by leasing out the 20% of the building that was vacant, it increased the value of the building by over 20%. And because of about 30%, they increased the value of the building. And by having a loan for 25% down, it means that I'm going to make over 100% on my investment in probably 2.5 years, plus the cash flow that we're receiving in between. So it's going to net out to be about 40% annualized, 50% annualized when we're all said and done.
And why 3 years? How did you come up with that?
3 years is my personal rule. I try to complete every project in 3 years. So technically that would be about 2 years to get all the renovations and lease ups and all the projects done. And then that 3rd year is where you want the expenses to be absolutely minimum and you want the maximum rent. And in commercial, you might give some free rent, you might give some tenant improvement allowance, you might have some deferred maintenance that you have to fix. So you try to load that all into the first year and a half. And then once everything is nice and stabilized and everything is leased up and everybody's paying their full rent, that's when you keep the expenses to a minimum. You still want to keep it in good shape, but you keep the expenses to the minimum, you keep the revenue to the maximum, and this way you have the highest net operating income possible. Because whatever that net operating income is what's going to determine what price you can get for the property. So, and if your market has a cap rate of 7-8% nowadays, you divide that NOI by the cap rate, and that gives you a realistic price for what somebody's going to pay for it. So the more you can increase the revenue and the more you can decrease the expenses. And some projects can take a while, you know, if you need permits, if you need, you know, if you need to find a tenant. And so we found a tenant, it took us 13 months, you know, they got 3 months free rent, you know, and then they're going to complain, oh, this faucet is leaking, this is that. So it takes you a few months after they've moved in to really get everything straightened out. So it can take you a year and a half, sometimes even 2 years to get everything really stabilized. Now, the dental office, it took me 2 months, you know, and I'm just waiting until they come back to me to renew the lease for 10 years. And as soon as I get that fresh lease, then I'm going to sell that property. So, because the longer the lease, the more value it has. So you just have to figure out what is a realistic timeline. And I never take a deal that I think is going to take more than 3 years. Because if you're going to take more than 3 years, it's just the return, unless if I could make 200-300% on my money and it took 5 years, I'd probably go for it. But I typically look to make 100% in 3 years. That's my general criteria.
So essentially, you're looking to double your money in 3 years.
Yes.
Excellent.
Well, hopefully more than that. Double the money on
At
sale
least.
and then cash flow in the meanwhile.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. That's great. Matthew, did you want to ask a question? I know we're on top of the hour, but I wanted to make sure you get the floor as well.
No, yeah, this is great, Ken. Thank you. Lots of interesting nuggets throughout. I will save some questions for maybe perhaps very briefly. It seemed like you weren't always or very often it sounded like you weren't investing in your backyard. What analysis or research went into where you're researching? I heard Oklahoma, and you're in a different part of Florida for some of your buildings. Like, how much research goes into that? Is it familiarity with the area, or is it all kind of technically driven?
No, I
Into
was
that.
looking for when I transitioned to Oklahoma and Central Florida, I was looking for more landlord friendly states in general, because New York really had sucked the life out of me as a landlord, and got very frustrated with that. So I started looking for good school districts, places that were experiencing a lot of growth and could support new construction. So this way I bought new properties with very little deferred maintenance, where I could have property managers back then to support the residential properties. And I wanted as little problems and interaction with the tenants as possible. Now with commercial, I look for good demographic growth. Okay, and there are a lot of states that have good demographic growth, and in the commercial space, most states are landlord friendly. Okay, because as long as you're not renting out to residential tenants, so you have a 10-unit multiplex and you have tenants in there, you have the same tenant laws as you do with any other residential property. But if you're renting out to businesses, most states are relatively reasonable with it. COVID being the exception to that in some states, but especially down south, we're having great population growth. A lot of jobs are coming here. A lot of companies are coming here, and Florida, on top of that, has no state tax. So if I can find great deals in Florida, I will prefer that, because if by chance I have to go visit the property, I'd rather go somewhere where I can drive and back the same day. Now, if somebody calls me up tomorrow and I have this great deal in Missouri, and it's phenomenal, I'll buy that too. But if I'm looking for deals, I'll look for deals that are, I don't want to say local, but within the state of Florida, because I don't have to deal with state taxes. I don't have to deal with, super long commutes. And I think there's opportunity everywhere, because I'm not looking for 1,000 deals. I'm looking for 5, or 1, and when you're looking for 1, you can find that almost anywhere. You just have to find the person that bought something that he doesn't understand, that he can't manage, that he's frustrated with. Maybe he's getting divorced, or he has other personal issues, or maybe he passed away and his kids have no interest in it. Similar to what house flippers do. But, at the end of the day, it's people that own all these properties. So they're subject to the same opportunities and risks as everybody else. And sometimes it can be more difficult because you have to learn. A commercial lease could be 60, 70 pages. A lot of people don't read them. If you don't read a lease, you might be obligated to stuff that you don't know. So it's not like a residential lease that's typically, 3 pages or something like that. So people make mistakes, and sucks for them, but you know, you're looking for those opportunities at the end of the day.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we're 5 after. I don't want to take more time, but Ken, this was amazing. Thank you so much again for coming on. Folks, you have Ken's contact information. Feel free to reach out, and hopefully we'll have Ken sometime again to talk about one of his creative deals in a lot more detail. On that note, thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening. Thank you, Ken, again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.